And with us in the studio for more is Colonel in the IDF Reserves, Olivia Rafowitz, now a senior security and military consultant, and our defense correspondent, Daniel Tzemach. And Daniel, and I said just in the last few hours, there have been updates on the story that you presented in that report.
Right. So now Israeli media is publishing the fact that it is expected there'll be another meeting with the Egyptian delegation regarding the potential long-term truce, whether it be just the issue of rehabilitation, also the issue of prisoner exchange. Not clear exactly what's going to be the agenda, likely both of those issues, if not more, but that this conversation will continue. Also, shortly after the delegation left the Gaza Strip, the Egyptian delegation, Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz summoned a group of foreign journalists and addressed several different security issues, one of which, of course, is the situation in Gaza. If we take a look at one of his statements, he said, and I quote, "I spoke with the Americans, the Egyptians, and many other leaders from around the world and made it clear to them that alongside the entry of goods such as food and medicine, which are basic humanitarian needs, the rehabilitation of the Gaza Strip needs to be accompanied by a long-term peace and, of course, the return of the remains of fallen IDF soldiers." From here, we don't see the mention of those hostages who are still there as well, 2 Israeli civilians that are also in the Gaza Strip that entered of their own volition. So this is another sort of element here as far as the Israeli camp is concerned. And we understand there's likely other information regarding what Sinwar was insinuating was progress towards a potential prisoner swap.
Right. Olivia, we've heard this talk after, this is now what, our 5th, 6th round of fighting between Israel and Gaza and Hamas. We've seen, after every one, we hear about possible efforts to form a long-term truce. Now we have added on to that the complication, of course, the return of the Israeli hostages and the fallen IDF soldiers. Is there any reason to think that this time it would be different and there are elements that actually could progress on one or maybe even both of these issues?
Good evening, Calev. I think this time it's a little bit different because the Egyptians are really willing to play a major role. It's very important for them. For them, first of all, in the Middle East, among the Arab countries, but also facing the USA, the new Biden administration. They want to show that they are the big player in this game. Now, concerning the possibility of an exchange, it's also clearer than a month ago. We got today from Yahya Sinwar himself during a speech in Gaza that he is asking for 1,111 prisoners in exchange of the remains of our soldiers, but also in exchange of the hostages in the Gaza Strip. He even said that this exchange could have been done a month ago, but there was, according to what
more than 1,100 prisoners sounds like a pretty steep. It's the kind of price Israel's paid before, and of course has been very criticized for that making.
It's a big price, but let's also talk about a list. A list has been sent by the Israeli side through the Egyptians for Hamas, a list of prisoners that could be released. Now, we don't know exactly how many, but it's more than 10. It's around a few hundreds. It's less than 1,111, but it's a big number. Now, the two sides have to meet in order to make a deal. The deal can be done at 2 conditions. Number one, the Egyptians will be a major player. They will play a role of intermediary. But we know also, Calev, that a week ago, even a little bit after the ceasefire, the Israeli government has sent a special envoy to some Arab state, not Egypt, another one, to play also the role of intermediary. The Israelis are keen to make this deal be done, be finished as soon as possible. It's a precondition, like you just mentioned before, for all the process of reconstruction of, I would say, new process in Gaza. For Israel, it's very important. For the public, it's very important. For the families, it's very important. And let's say that for the new government, in a way.
Well, I'm glad you raised that, Daniel, because let's be honest, there's going to be critics of whether the deal happens, no matter how it is, because there have been criticism of past hostage deals, and of course, reaching some kind of truce with Gaza. This is, if we do see this change government, Naftali Bennett, Avigdor Lieberman, who have openly talked about even overthrowing Hamas or reoccupying Gaza, would have to sign off on a long-term truce. It looks like it would be a pretty tough call for any government, especially for this new government that may be forming.
And Calev, I think also the fact that, and as Olivia and I were discussing earlier, the fact that this has taken so long, we're talking about 7 years. 7 years to potentially hand over, first of all, to actually hand over prisoners, first of all, because at the end of the day, there was a belief that Israel would be leveraging this humanitarian aid, as Olivia was describing, potentially with other partners in the Middle East, but also leveraging the humanitarian aid and rehabilitation in general so that they would be able to retrieve the bodies of Oron Shaul and Adar Golden without necessarily giving prisoners. Yahya Sinwar, the person that is really the head honcho, he was returned in a prisoner swap. So when we're talking about the significance of this sort of deal taking place, especially as you mentioned, with right-wing hawks like Naftali Bennett, like Avigdor Lieberman, who've been very critical about the money that has been funneled over to Hamas, have both been defense ministers anyway, but still, at the end of the day, this is a decision that could certainly have serious consequences for their reputation, but it does appear as though the political world right now in Israel, there are a lot of other issues that are probably taking up their attention of both the critics as well as the public in general.
Let me just ask you, Olivia, Yahya Sinwar came in as the hard man of Gaza to take over, was seen as even a move to even a more extreme position. Is this the man who could make a long-term truce with Israel?
It's a very interesting question, very interesting point. Yahya Sinwar would like to be like Yasser Arafat, move from the strictly military terrorist point of view to a political position. He understands that in order to play a major political role among the Palestinian movements, not only inside the Gaza Strip, but also in Jerusalem and in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, he has to move forward. And this issue concerning the prisoners and the hostages is a humanitarian issue, which could help him a lot, particularly with the international press, media, with the Americans, with the Europeans, and with the Egyptians. And suddenly, he will move from Azadin el-Qassam, military issues, to political issues. He will win a lot. We have to be very careful not to make him feel that he won.
Right.
We have to make this deal very, very technical and not political.
Right. It could also win him